Alright, let's make this app look better. So gonna pop open the variable.scss. If I want to change the app background color, I can just override this ion background color property. Okay, and I'm just gonna set it to a kind of dark color for now. And okay, so we see that it changed the background color, but the foreground color is not exactly right. If we want to change the text color, we can just add this ion text color property as well. So let's see how that looks. Okay, so the text color has been changed. So already this is looking quite a bit more spicy. I think I want a less dark color, probably something more like this. And let's change the primary theme color to be just the JamieBot theme color, which is this number right here. It's that nice teal. And the secondary color can just be that color, but maybe like a lot brighter. And let's go ahead and choose a success color. I'll just eyeball it at somewhere around here. That might look good. Okay, so this is our new look. I think I'm going to change the primary color to pop out quite a bit more. And we just won't really use the secondary color. I think that looks a lot better. It's a lot more easy to read. So I think this looks very nice. Oh, and something to make it scale a little bit better. I realized that if you're completing a lot of tasks, the completed list could get like quite large, in which case we'll be listening to a very large collection, and it'll get like slower and slower with the more things that get on that list. And so what I'm going to do is, since this is an important things list, I'm just going to limit the number of important things. We'll say there's like a limit of 100 things for each list. So what I'm going to do is make it so that the completed list, which is the one that's probably going to get the largest, I'm going to make it just that list, only fetch the last like 100 things or something like that. So this is how I'm going to do that. Basically just keep the same old query, except for if the list name is done, then it's going to limit it to 100. And just for testing, I'm going to limit it to like 2 things, just to test to see if it even works. Okay, so hopping over to the complete list, we say there's only 2 things on it, but I know that there's more things on it than that, so I'm going to change the limit back to 100. We see that there are the 4 things returned again, so it is working. I'm not sure if the other lists will get that big. They might. Just to make myself feel better, I'm gonna make it always limited to 100 items. That's kind of just part of the app. It's like the critical things list. And this is mostly because I don't want to add infinite scroll, because this video is already long enough, and I think there's a certain beauty to limiting the amount of things that can be on the list, because it's really for truly important things, and if there's more than 100 things on there, they're probably not important. Okay, so I just added this alert that shows up if the user adds an item when the list size is greater than or equal to 100, and it just says critical overload. Too many important items. You have over 100 items in this list, only showing the top 100. This app is pretty funny, isn't it? And I'm also going to refactor this 100 to be a variable so that I don't have to keep hard coding 100 everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to declare it as a constant up here. And first, let's just set it equal to 5 or something, and then replace all the times where I say 100 with that variable for max list size. This one has 4 items in it, so you can add items to the completed list just in case you feel like you did something and then you want to add it to your log of completed things. Oh, it looks like the text in this is also white, but we need to change this specifically to have text, which is black because the header is not showing. Yeah, it looks like we need to do that first because I can't even see the words that I'm typing. So back inside of the variable.scss, I'm just going to select all ion alerts and then override their text color to be just a dark color like this. Alright, and there we go. Now I can see the text once again. So we'll go back over here to completed and try and add another item. We'll call this one golf, add that one. Okay, so now this next one should trigger a warning. It's going to add water. Okay, critical overload. Too many important items. You have over 5 items in this list, only showing the top 5. Great. Isn't that a hilarious message? So you can see that it is indeed showing only the top 5. But then if you remove one, so like if I remove water, then it pops test back on there. So basically it can only have max items in it. Okay, I'm going to go and change this back to 100 because I think that's a good number. And I also want to see how the app login screen looks once again. So I'm going to click sign out, And okay, so this is white still. That's fine by me. I do want to add a message here that says that the user can sign up here, because some users get confused because it says sign in with email. So I'm just going to make a paragraph tag and put it right above the Firebase UI and just make it say create an account or log into an existing one below. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks decent, except for it is not centered. So inside of the login page, I'm going to style all paragraph tags to be text-align of center. And there we go, create an account or log into an existing one below. Okay, so I think that's clear as mud. Also, I noticed that when you click on the terms of service, it goes there, but then because of our redirect back to login, it just changes the page back to login. What I'm going to do instead is link this app's terms of service to an off-site terms of service. If you wanted your apps to be on-site, like within the app itself, then inside of the app.component.ts, I would just check to make sure that the route was not at TOS or privacy. However, I'm going to change the app just to link to some of my own terms of service, just a generic terms of service that I wrote. And there's a good template at this website right here. If you search GitHub for this, you'll find this one. It's a good one. It of course depends on what kind of app you're making, but that's kind of similar to one that I use. Okay, so let's try signing in once again and make sure everything looks good. So here we are, we have all our data still saved. One thing I do want to improve is making this icon up here, making this button kind of more prominent. So in the list.html, I'm going to change this button to be a round button, and that will just give it a little bit more shape. Okay, so it is round, and I'm also going to change the color to be primary. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. I kind of want to see if there's another icon for adding things. Yeah, like this add circle one, I think that would look a lot better. So here, instead of just add, we're going to put add dash circle. And I'm also going to put this on separate lines to make it fit all on the same screen. Okay, there we go. That's more what I'm talking about. So that looks really good. Okay, so in order to do the enter press, after we present the alert, I'm just gonna add an event listener to key down, and when key down is fired, that means that the user has pressed a key, and if the key code is equal to 13, then that means that they press enter. And so this big function up here, which handles the OK, I'm just gonna put that into my own function, just so that we don't have to write that same code twice. And I'm just gonna call it handle add item. And it is going to need a parameter, which we're going to call val for now. And then back up here, we're going to put this dot handle add item as the handler for that function, as well as right here. And the tricky part about this is we're going to have to actually reach inside and grab that text value, unfortunately. So inspecting that in the HTML, the input has a class of alert input. So we can just grab all the elements with that class name under the source element, and then grab the text content, and hopefully that will be good. And it looks like before our code was expecting a val to have a subobject called task, but I'm just going to make the parameter to this the text itself, and then here I'm simply going to make a wrapper function which unravels that task and then passes it into the handle add item. So basically the handle add item just takes the raw text. So I've added the type as string because it's always going to be a string. And then inside of here, I just check to see if the length is 0. If the length is 0, then I'm not going to add a new item to the list because that doesn't make any sense. And so let's try that out. I'm going to try and add a new item. We'll call it speaker. Going to press enter. Okay, we got the error, cannot read text content of undefined. Okay, to debug a little bit, I'm just going to add in console.log, press to enter, as well as trying to log the results of getting the elements by that class name. I'm going to log the source element as well, because I think that's probably not the correct source element. Oh, looks like the source element is the input. That makes a lot of sense. So we can actually just remove that entirely and immediately just grab the text content. That's pretty cool. I guess that makes sense because we press enter within the source element. Okay, so let's try adding once again. Adding test, press enter. And looks like it didn't do anything that time. Let's console.log the text content as well as any other text properties, maybe text node from .toString. Let's see what that one gives. Okay, so we'll try adding test. And looks like we get empty string and then we get a 3. I think the property is actually just a value instead. Let's try that. Okay, gonna add a new element, call it test. Okay, so that did work. Also, we need to close the modal on enter press as well. So we'll just call alert.dismiss. Okay, so gonna try adding my task, press enter, and then it adds it, so that's great. It's really important that enter press work because it's a much better user experience. It was a little bit trickier than I initially thought, but it's not that much code. Also, it would be nice if the input field got focused when it was opened, so let's see if we can do that. Okay, so I'm just going to try focusing the first element with the tag name of input. Alright, looks like that worked. So I can try adding a task in here. I didn't have to click in here to focus it. Super nice. New task. That's really good. Let's try it over here in later. My later task. Enter. Alright, works perfect. One more feature I could think of is like if you want to rename a task, probably just you want to click on it and then you'd want to be able to rename it. So I'm going to have it open a similar modal and then you'll be able to change the name that way. So I'm going to repurpose this add method to be generic since the add and edit are going to be almost exactly the same. So I'm going to rename it to add or edit and then make 2 new functions up here which call add or edit. And then the only things that really need to change are the title. So we'll make this a parameter. So we'll call the parameter header and then add, we'll just pass that in like that. And then for edit, it can be edit task. And then the other thing that needs to change is the handler, or what happens when you press OK. So we're going to pass that in as the second option here. So add is exactly the same, just like that, but edit is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to make this handler function called handle edit item, and then down here I'm going to declare it, and it's going to do almost exactly the same thing, except for it's going to call set instead of add, and it needs to merge the properties instead of just overriding the whole thing. And it's also for setting a document. It's not adding to like a collection like the add item was. And we also need to know which item exactly we're editing. So this needs to take in an item, and then here we just use the item.id. And so we're basically just overriding the text for that item. The item needs to take in an item as a parameter, and then it can just pass that item to the handle edit item handler. Okay, now the only thing left to do is call edit inside of the HTML, which says edit, and then it gets past the item. And that should be all we need to do. So first let's try adding an item just to make sure that still works. Okay, we'll call it just nonsense. Okay, now let's try editing that item. Okay, so far so good. Looks like the text in here wasn't pre-filled with the old text, so I definitely need to change that. So I'm going to make add or edit also take in an optional parameter here called item, and that's what this question mark means, is that it's optional. And then in edit, I am going to pass that as the third parameter to this add or edit, which is the thing that opens up the alert. And then down here, I'm just going to pass in the item.text as the value for the input so that it's initialized when it's being edited. But that's only if item exists. So if item exists, it'll be item.text. Otherwise, it's going to be the empty string so that new items which are added start off as the empty string. Okay, so if I click on one of these guys, we'll see that the text is indeed populated, so that's super great. Let's see if it edits it. So I'll change it to be like a bunch of C's. Okay, yep, it changed it. Awesome. And let's try adding a new one, and it starts out blank. Okay, so already this app is pretty functional. I'm not sure how many of these buttons we can have, probably a lot since they're just icons, but something that would be nice is if we could move them up and down simply by clicking like an up or down button over here. So let's see if we can add that. Okay, so searching for up in the icons. There's several different icons here. I think I'm going to choose this arrow up. Okay, so I'm going to declare these 2 more options right here, and then maybe we'll set them to be the secondary color just so that we can distinguish between them better. And then on click the leftmost one is going to call a function called move up, and then the rightmost one is going to call a function called move down. Okay, and then the name of the first one is arrow up, and the name of the second one is arrow down. And instead of passing the item, I need it to actually pass the index of the item so that we can swap the item and then the one that it's next to. And the way that I do that is I first, in the for loop, I need to grab the index, so let I equals index. That's how we get a reference to the index. And then here we'll just pass in I instead of item. Okay, so I've declared the functions and I've started writing the code for the move up function. So basically I was just thinking that it would grab a reference to the item at this index and then set the position. We'll need to use merge here, I just realized, because otherwise it will override the fields in that object, but we just want it to only override the position. So we're going to set the position of the target object, which was slided, to be the position of the one above it, so index -1, because in our array the indexes still go down despite the database being the opposite of that. So we basically grab the one above that and then set this position to be that's position. And then we do the opposite here. We grab the one above it and we set its position to be the one below it, which is like the target. Oh, and I was thinking that out of bounds exceptions would be handled by the UI, so we just won't let them call this function unless like it makes sense to call it, like the top item in the list won't be able to be moved up, for instance. And let's just simplify this and put it all in one function and just call it like move by offset, and then it'll just take in an offset, and we'll just add the offset here and then add the offset there, and then in the HTML we'll just call move by offset with for the first one it's going to be -1, and then for the move down it's going to be +1. So let's check and see if that works. Alright, so I'm going to try and move AOEUU. Let's try moving it down. Hey, it worked. Awesome. Try moving it back up. That worked again. Let's see how it looks with the primary color for all the buttons instead. I think it looks not bad. I kind of actually just want to make them all the secondary color because the white is a little bit hard to see right there. So I'm going to change those all to be the secondary color. Then I'm going to change the secondary color to be quite a bit darker just so that we can see it better. Okay, so that looks a lot better. There's a lot more contrast that way. And then finally we need to disable some of these options based on the position of the item in the list, otherwise bad things could happen. We'd reach out of bounds and our list would get all screwed up. So I'm going to bind to the disabled property. The down arrow should be disabled if the item is the last item in the list. So that will be if I is equal to the item's length -1. And that's because the index is 0 based, so it's not the size of the list, it's the size of the list -1. And then moving up should be disabled if I is equal to 0, because when it's the first item in the list, that's the only time when you can't move it up. And actually, instead of disabled, I'm just going to use an ngIf just to kind of simplify it. ngIf is the opposite of disabled, so I'm just going to change this to not equals and we should be good. Okay, so top one can only be moved down. That's good. This one can be moved both up and down. And the bottom one, oops, I accidentally deleted the bottom one. The bottom one can be moved up, but not down. So that's great. This is working just great. Okay, I think we're just about there in terms of functionality. One thing that might be nice is actually adding an icon. So I'm going to do a quick icon design. The icon should be 1024 by 1024. I use a program called Affinity Photo. So I'm going to save this file to my assets folder. It's just going to be called icon.affinityphoto. And I'll export a PNG later. I just like keeping the resource files all in one place. And what I'm going to do is just download the SVG for the Ionic icon, which I've been using. Then I'm just going to drag this icon into Affinity Photo so that I can use it in my own icon design. This is like the power symbol, it's like the symbol of the app. So I'm going to resize that to be, maybe that big. Align it center and align it middle. Then I'm going to add a gradient. I think that looks super cool. So cool, in fact, that I'm going to copy that color and go and change our color scheme. I'm going to change the secondary color to be that purple, and then the primary color can be that blue. And let's just see how that affected our app. So there we go, there's our purple as the secondary, so I think that looks real good. Alright, so this looks good. I'm going to save this as a PNG file in the same place. Oh, and something else that I noticed is that you can slide the items in the completed list. So what I'm going to do is bind this expandable property to allow done, and we'll see if that fixes it. So here we can still drag. Let's see if we can drag inside of completed. We cannot, so we fixed it. And now let's build it for a simulator. Okay, so the platform has been added, so now I'm going to build for iOS. Also, this is a good checkpoint to back up again, so I'm going to say git add -a, git commit -m, and then I'm going to say move up and down, color scheme, and those are the main things, and then I'll just push that to origin master. Okay, I got an error building saying that the archive wasn't found. To overcome this error, you just use this build flag with the modern build system set to 0. That just fixes that error. I don't know what to say other than that. Okay, now it basically succeeded. It just says that it needs code signing. So I'm going to run open dot. Oh, and by the way, if building is unfamiliar to you, be sure to watch my video on building. I have a full Mac tutorial on that. Windows 1 is coming later. So I'm going to open the Xcode Workspace project. Alright, then I'm going to try running on a simulator. Okay, and here's the app working. Okay, so it looks like we have some problems. First problem is that the header is white. Second problem is that sliding back takes you back a page, but I don't want it to do that. So in the Ion router outlet, I'm going to add this swipe gesture equals false, and that should disable it. Looks like the header is white here as well. I'm going to have to style all Ion headers manually. So in addition to setting the Ion background color, I'm also going to set the toolbar background to be the same thing, and same thing with the color. So that should fix that problem we're having up there. Also, another problem that's kind of severe is that the plus button is kind of hidden up there. That's because we're not using the default header anymore. So we're going to go back to using the header, even if it means we have to type the same code a couple of times. Inside of the list component, the toolbar is not really part of an Ion header, and it really should be, because that's what Ionic wants you to do. So I'm going to take this out and put it into a new component. So I'm going to generate a list header down here, and then inside of the list header I'm going to paste in that toolbar, and we're going to need to pass in the title and the items to this header. Okay, so there they are as inputs, and also now this add button needs to be an output because it needs to communicate with its parent, which is going to be like any of these root lists like crit or done. Okay, so I've declared add as an output and just set it equal to be a new event emitter. And then in the HTML, how we get this to work is instead of calling add, we just say add.emit, and that will emit an event to the host component. So let's hook that up to the host component right now. So I'm going to make an Ion header in the crit component to start out, and then in there I'm going to put my app list header, and here I can pass in, we'll need both the title of the list and we'll need the list itself. So I've added this myList attribute. So we basically just need the list of items. So that's going to reach inside the list and then grab its items attribute. Okay, then we also need to bind to the add event. So when add is called on the app list header, I'm going to call mylist.add, and then that will call this add method within the list. And then inside of the components module, I'm just going to register the list header, and we also need it inside of the exports array. Okay, so here's our list. Now the top bar is looking a little bit more prominent. That looks a lot better. Let's try clicking add. Okay, so that does open a modal. Let's try adding another item to the list. Click enter. Okay, that adds it just fine. Let's try completing this one. Okay, that should be over here. Yep. So it's working just fine. I bet you that that will fix the problem inside of the app. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this header part and then put it inside of all the pages. It should be almost exactly the same. I just need to add my list once again, and then that's what this variable is referring to. So you can access cross siblings like that, which is super nice. And I'll finally add it to the later page as well. Okay, that all seems to be working just great. One thing I did notice is that this loading property doesn't exist. We're going to need to bind that to an input property as well. Okay, so I've declared it as an input property and it's a boolean. And then I'm going to bind it in the HTML like this, and we'll test it for the crit page first to make sure it works. So now when it's loading, it doesn't show 0 as the number of items in the list, which is what the loading was for. So I'm just going to add that to the done page and the later page. Alright, and there we go. Looks like it's working just fine. Except for I passed in critical as the list name for all of them. Whoops. I'm going to change that to be later for the later page, and then complete for the complete page. Okay, so we got critical, later, complete, and the profile. Okay, that looks great. Let's test it on a mobile device. Oh, and also the icon isn't showing up, and we also need a splash screen, so that's 2 more problems. Okay, so the header is showing up very prominently now up here. That looks much better. I'm going to check to make sure that the login page looks good as well. Okay, so here we are at crit list. I'm also going to try swiping to the left. Just sliding around, seeing if I can get out of here. Okay, it looks great. Crit list. Create an account or log into an existing one below. Great. Okay, now let's try adding an item. The text inside of it is not fine. It is the wrong color. Let's just change the background color as well for inputs inside of the Ion alert. So that will just change the background color to be white. Oh, and I just realized that the reason that the icon isn't showing up is because when I added the icon, I put it inside of the assets folder, because for some reason I was having a hard time finding the resources folder. I think it's because the app hadn't been built yet, so I was confused and I just put it inside of the assets folder. So the assets folder does contain an icon, but that's not the one that's used when the app is being built. I'm just going to copy the icon files and then go and put them over in the resources folder where they belong, replacing the existing icon. And then in here there's also a splash.png, and it's much larger than the icon. So the icon is 1024 by 1024, but the splash is 2732 by 2732. So I'm going to drop this into Affinity Photo and edit it, and then just copy my background there and then go and paste it inside of here. And I think I'll need to shrink this icon inside of here because the splash page, even though it's very large, it doesn't have like that much room for the text inside of it. So I'm going to align it center and align it middle, and then down here I'm going to put the name of the app, and I'm going to choose a cooler looking font for it, and I'm going to align it center once again. Awesome, so I think that looks really good. I'm going to save this so that I don't lose the Affinity Photo file as splash.affinityphoto, and then export it as a PNG in order to override that splash file. So the splash.png and the icon.png, those are what's actually used when you build the app. But if you've already built the app, then you need to rerun Ionic, Cordova, resources, and then platform name, and that will just regenerate the icon files. They're like a bunch of different sizes, and it just uses this file to create them. And then back inside of the assets folder, I'm going to remove my old Affinity Photo file, and then just replace this fave icon.png with my icon and change the name just in case that's used anywhere. Okay, now I'm going to build the app once again. Okay, and it's kind of small, but you can see that the icon is indeed loaded up here. Okay, there we go. There's our sexy splash screen. I want to go to the home page and see how that looks. Okay, so there's our sexy icon. The name of the app is still called My App. Inside of the config.xml, I'm going to go and change the app name to be CritList. Okay, I'm also going to change the description and the author. The description is just going to be a critical task manager. And I'm going to go change the package.json as well, just filling out my info right there. Okay, so let's try building that again. Okay, it looks like it says that when you change the app name, you have to do this. So I'm going to do that. And then Xcode is wigging out. I'm just going to close it. Alright, then I'm going to build once again for iOS. Okay, build succeeded. Let's open up that Xcode project once again. Okay, so let's check out the name. So there we go, it's called CritList, has a cool power icon, and then the app is just working. One change I forgot to show you guys is that If you click this, then this background is indeed white like we were trying to set it inside of the SCSS. One more thing I am going to do is add a script here called publish web, and this is just going to do a production build as well as publish to Firebase hosting so that you guys can use the app on the web as well if you'd like. So I'm just going to run my new task here, npm run publish web. Looks like I got an error here saying that the display name property doesn't exist on type user. I like using any types, so I'm just going to declare any as the user type. Okay, let's try rerunning that. Okay, looks like it's all done. This is the URL, you guys. We get our very own Firebase app URL, so no need to buy a domain server if you feel like just leaving Firebase app in there. Also, since CritList is a unique name, there's no number after it. Sometimes you'll see a number there. That's if someone else has already made a project with your name. So here we are. I'm at critlist.firebase.app.com, and then after I log in, here's all of my stuff. So that's it for the video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed working side by side with me on this project. I know it was quite a long series. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.